So what are these fundamental rights? Now before we move to what is the definition of the state, let's try and understand what do you mean by a right? I mean, maybe I should have asked this question at the beginning of the session, but this is the appropriate time to ask what is a right, because it is linked to the state. What do you mean by a right? We saw what are rights: natural rights, fundamental rights, constitutional rights, legal rights. Yeah. If in a simple layman term, if you have to describe what is a right, what will you say? Yes, rights are basically claims. You have the right means what? You can claim something from someone. I have the right to ask him for money, which means what? You have a claim against him for the money. So let's take a simple example. Many of you may be having two-wheelers, some of you may be having even four-wheelers. So you take an insurance policy, isn't it? When you take an insurance policy, you are the person who is insuring, right? So you are the insured, right? You are the, if you take an insurance policy, right? As a two-wheeler, you have a two-wheeler, right? I'm very poor at drawing, but let's, for example, so you are the owner of the two-wheeler. So you are taking a policy by paying money to, let's say, general insurance company. So you as a person are the insured, general insurance company is the insurer. You pay a premium of 10,000 rupees for your two-wheeler or 1,000 rupees for your two-wheeler for insurance. And if there is any damage to this two-wheeler, this insurer will repay you. So what does it mean? You have a claim against the insurance company. That is why you have a right to claim against the insurance company. How do you get that right? Because you have paid the premium, isn't it? If you apply the same logic to fundamental rights, because you are born as a citizen of this country, or because you are residing as a person in this country, just by virtue of that, you have certain claims against the state. And the state is bound to satisfy those claims and not take away any of those rights unreasonably. Are you able to follow? So what do you mean by rights? Rights are nothing but ultimately the claims that the citizens have against whom? Against the state. By virtue of being a citizen of the country, and I told you additionally person, because there are many rights which can be enforced even by persons residing in the country, even if they are foreigners. But what is the underlying fundamental principle behind rights? They are claims which the citizens of a country can claim. Against whom? Against the state. Right? So that is the basic layman definition of rights. Rights are claims. Of whom? Of citizens. Guys, please understand that these may just look basic conceptual points, but there have been preliminary examination questions even from these basic concepts. I mean, I have been teaching it like this for the last 5 years, right? And in 2017, what was one of the preliminary examination question? How will you define what is the closest or what is the best possible definition of fundamental rights? Rights are those which are enjoyed only by few. Rights are enjoyed by the privileged over the underprivileged. Rights are enjoyed only by, or something which are enforced by the state. And then finally, what was the correct option which was given? Rights are claims of citizens against the state. And that was the correct answer. I mean, and so these underlying conceptual points, it doesn't just help improve your understanding, they're also useful from an examination point of view. Please have that in mind. So rights are claims of citizens against whom? Against the state. So we know rights are claims of whom? Of citizens. We know who is a citizen, who is born in this country, and of course there are certain rights, many rights which even persons, right? So you can extend it in the Indian context, rights or claims of citizens, persons living in this country against the state. But now then comes, what do you mean by a state? You cannot, leave it to somebody's interpretation. Because then many state authorities, on the day the rights are tried to be enforced, they will say, no, we are not a state. isn't it? Because you don't want to fulfill. So that is why the first article under fundamental rights, part 3, article 12, what do they do first? First they define what is a state, right? So their first job itself to define what is a state. So in this part, unless the context otherwise requires, the state includes who all? Government and Parliament of India, government and legislature of each of the states, and all local authorities within the territory of India under the control of Government of India. So very, very clear, no ambiguity whatsoever. What does the government include? What does the state include? Government and Parliament of India. Both the executive and the legislature of the union. The executive of the union is the Government of India and the legislature of the union is the Parliament of India, right? So what do you mean by executive? What do you mean by legislature? That is basic. Legislature is the one which makes the laws. So the Parliament makes the laws. And what is the job of the executive? The job of the executive is go and implement those laws. So both the branches of the government, the legislature and the executive, right? Both the branches of governance under the constitution at the union level, both of them are state. Similarly, the executive and legislature at the state level. Here state means what? Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Karnataka, Telangana. At the states level of each of the states. That is also part of state. So the definition of state you should be very clear. You should not confuse this with Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Karnataka, Haryana, UP, Bihar. They are states of Indian Union. But what do you mean by state? Especially for the purpose of fundamental rights and all. State means both the legislature and the executive, both at the union, which is at the central level, as well as at individual states level. And not just that, it also includes local authorities, Panchayati Raj, municipal corporations, and even any other authority under the control of Government of India. So even if an embassy outside the country, but if it is under the control of Government of India, that also is technically state. And the Supreme Court in one of its judgments way back in 1959 itself has said, if a private player does the job which the state is supposed to do, which means which the government is supposed to do, then for the purposes of part 3, even that person can be considered as state. For example, issuing passport is the job of the state, isn't it? The Ministry of External Affairs is supposed to issue you passport. But if any of you have applied for passport in the recent past, you will find that TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, is the agency which is actually doing this job of giving you appointments or verifying your documents and finally dispatching your passport. So the government has asked TCS to do what it is ideally supposed to do or actually supposed to do. So in this case, if even the TCS wrongfully takes away your fundamental right, or if it is doing something which is against your fundamental rights while processing the passport application, even that can be taken to the Supreme Court directly if the need arises and if there is a violation of your fundamental right, right? So this is the definition of state. Why is the definition of state important? Why did they start with the definition of the state in part 3? Because basically rights are nothing but claims of citizens against the state. So you need to know what is a state or what is the definition of a state, and that is what is first given in part 3.